been learning about solving inequalities, and now it's time to practice. We're going to be working on problem number 2. The nice thing about this one is this quadratic inequality is already in standard form and it's factored. So I'm just going to rewrite this as the related equation and solve. So now I'm going to break this apart. I've got negative quantity 2x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. Now I need to think about, there's an understood negative 1 in front of this parentheses. To get rid of that, what I'm going to do is divide both sides by negative 1. So it reduces here and I get 2x minus 1 equals, and remember 0 divided by any number is just 0. Then for this factor, I'm going to solve this equation by subtracting 3 or adding a negative 3 to both sides. So that gives me x equals negative 3 over here. That's one of my endpoints. I need to finish solving 2x minus 1 equals 0. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And that leaves me with 2x equals 1. And then the last step, dividing both sides by 2. That gives me x equals 1/2. So my 2 points that I'm going to place on the number line are 1/2 and negative 3. While I'm drawing the number line, I want you to think about, are the points going to have open or closed circles? And if you said open circles, you're correct. So we are going to have an open circle where x is 1/2. That's going to be about right here. So I'm going to have an open circle here. And then for x equals negative 3, I'm going to put my open circle there. And notice our number line is now broken up into 3 different intervals. In fact, let me go ahead and put negative 4 here just so we can kind of carry out the number line a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to test a point in this interval, and this interval. So I'm going to pick nice, easy numbers. I'm going to pick negative 4 for this interval. I'm going to pick 0 because I always like to test 0 if I can. And then I'm going to pick 1 for this interval. So the first one, I'm going to move this paper because I'm running out of room. I'm going to test negative 4 in my inequality. So my inequality, I'm going to write it up here so we have it fresh. Negative 2x minus 1 quantity, and then x plus 3 quantity. And we want to find out when it's greater than 0. So if I plug in negative 4 everywhere I see x, 2 times negative 4 for the x minus 1, and then negative 4 plus 3 is greater than 0. So let's do some simplifying in here. Remember order of operations. We've got to multiply inside first and then do our subtraction. So 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. Actually, let me show that step. Negative 8 minus 1. And now I can do the negative 4 plus 3. That's negative 1. So inside negative 8, I have negative 8 minus 1. That's going to give me negative 9. So again, treat this like you have a negative 1 there. Negative 1 times negative 9 is 9. And then 9 times negative 1 is negative 9. Is that greater than 0? No, it is not. So this interval gives false inequalities. So we are not going to select that interval as part of the solution. So I'm going to put an X above that part of the interval. Now let's test 0. So again, I'm plugging in 0 everywhere I have an x in my inequality. 0 plus 3 greater than 0. Okay, again, do the simplifying the exact same way. Here I have negative, and then I've got 0 minus 1, since 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 3, I can already add that and get 3. And then I've got negative 1 inside, because 0 minus 1 is negative 1, times 3, greater than 0. think like that's a negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 is greater than 0, and that is actually a true statement. So I'm going to come to this interval, and I'm going to put a check. Let's test 1. So I'm plugging in 1 everywhere I see x. 2 times 1 minus 1 times 1 plus 3. Is that greater than 0? 2 times 1 is 2, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. 1 plus 3 is 4, greater than 0. So then I've got, remember, understood negative 1 there. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. Is that greater than 0? No, it is not. So that gives us false inequalities. So going back to my number line, I see that the only interval that is going to work, that has values that will make my inequality true, are the ones that are between negative 3 and 1/2. Now I'm shading all those values, but I cannot shade negative 3 or 1/2 because my inequality is simply greater than. It's not greater than or equal to. So now let's write our solution with interval notation. Since I'm not including the intervals negative 3 and 1/2, I'm going to use parentheses. So I have negative 3 as my first endpoint and 1/2 as the second endpoint, and neither of those are included, and this shows that we are giving the solution as the interval between negative 3 and 1/2. Be careful, this is not an ordered pair. It is interval notation.